Okay, welcome ladies and gentlemen to the Birmingham Tech Week. The name of the presentation today is the dark web and threat actors. We're a big, fan of Birmingham Tech Week, obviously being a Birmingham company, and I'll go into that details later. But yeah, again, just like to thank Birmingham Tech Week and the associated sponsors for the opportunity to speak to our local community. I'm not going to name all the sponsors, but I think you can see the logos on the screen. Thank you very much, Michael. And if we then jump on to the introduction. So again, my name's Chris Woods and Michael Earle that will be doing the presentation today. Let's give a bit of an introduction on myself. So again, Chris Woods, I've been in the cybersecurity industry probably for about 24, 25 years now. I'm getting older by the hour. My background, I started life as a penetration tester, working for a company called Fujitsu, working for the Japanese. Worked for them, great company for 7 years, basically doing penetration testing for usually large organisations and banks. From my Fujitsu days, I then worked for a company called HP, Hewlett Packard, where I was the cybersecurity director for their basically building global cybersecurity capability for Hewlett Packard. That job that I had for 7 years took me across the globe. So worked a lot out in the US, lived out in Italy for a couple of years in a place called Frascati. I worked on the European Space Agency, which is out in Frascati, which is actually European based, but they have head office in Frascati. So lived in Italy for a couple of years. Did a lot with the UK government. So again, basically part of my role was working on critical national infrastructure. So again, did a lot with the UK government and GCHQ when I was at Hewlett Packard around security, around protecting critical national infrastructure. That role then took me, when I left kind of Italy and left the UK, to a place called Qatar, or Qatar, as it's pronounced Qatar, but it's probably called in this country Qatar. I went out there for 4 years, basically doing a very similar role to what I did when I was at HP as the director, was building global capability to protect the Qatari government. Did that for 4 years, and then 4 years ago I came back, it's going to be 4 or 5 years ago, and created a company called CyberQ Group. Now, just a little bit on CyberQ Group. We're a global business. We have offices out in Ohio. We have offices out in the Philippines. We also have offices out in Australia. I'm originally from Birmingham, so I should say that. I'm originally from a place called Smethwick. But again, the company is based in Birmingham. We have offices in Brum. And the reason for the name actually, which I think is quite important. So CyberQ Group, cyber is obviously what we do. So we make businesses cyber resilient. We do a lot of cybersecurity services and collaboration. So hence the cyber. The Q is because I'm a big James Bond fan. So if anyone knows James Bonds and know who Q is, it's a fictitious department and person, James Bonds, that develops pens that kill people. We like to think we're doing something similar, not pens that kill people, but we like to think we do something similar in the CyberQ Group, where we're all about innovation. We're all about creating services and creating technologies to stay one step ahead of the attackers. And group, obviously, because we're globally based, obviously with what I've mentioned previously. Now, the purpose of this presentation is to really give just an overview of the dark web and also the threat actors. And for that, we're fortunate to be joined from Michael, who's our lead threat intelligence guy. Michael, do you want to just quickly give an overview on yourself, please?
Yeah, will do. So as Chris mentioned, I'm the cyber threat intelligence lead at CyberQ Group. So my work predominantly involves using intelligence and knowledge to combat cyber issues. I work a lot in open source intelligence, but the predominant focus for the last couple of years of me has been the dark web investigations that we do. As you'll find out from this presentation, really, the dark web is more of it's a pretty critical thing when it comes to cybersecurity that I think a lot of people overlook. It's one of the starting places for a lot of criminal activity, and it's a starting place for a lot of criminal work and anti-cyber work. Yeah, it's kind of my introduction. Predominantly my focus has been open source and dark web, so not so many years as you, Chris, but getting there.
That's a good thing, Michael, actually. That's not a bad thing. But anyway, so let's go on. So let's dive into the presentation. If you go to the next slide then, Michael. Before I'm going to talk about the dark web, I need to sort of explain different type of threat actors, because I think that's really important that people just get a concept of different types of threat actors. Obviously, you know, we're fortunate, and I'm fortunate over the last 20 years, and at CyberQ Group as well, we work with some very, very large customers. And, you know, there's a perception that, you know, there's a teenager in some bedroom somewhere hacking companies and making you know, and stealing data for the greater good. I want to kind of, don't get me wrong, there probably is that, I'm sure there is, but there's also a motive and a method behind some of these threat actors. Now, before I jump in the dark web, I just want to give you, ladies and gentlemen, just a feel for the type of threat actors. Now, at a very high level, you get 4 type of threat actors. So, you know, at the top, you get organised crime, you get hacktivism, you get insider, and you get state-sponsored. Now, I'm going to talk about them 4. Now, I'm going to kick off with hacktivism first. Now, hacktivism as a type of threat actor, they're motivated by a cause. So they're motivated by the environment, they're motivated by something that they're passionate about, something that they want to get a message across. Now, hacktivism's motivation is really around embarrassing an organisation and getting their message out. So hacktivisms aren't in it for the money. They're not in it to get a lot of street cred. They're not in it for should I say, for themselves, individually for themselves, for their personal gain. They're in it to get a message across. And therefore, hacktivism's focused on social media, focused on websites, hacking these, you know, social media, hacking websites to try and embarrass a company and also to get their message across. Again, very different motives and very different tactics and techniques, I should say, around that. So that's hacktivism in a quick overview. You then get organised crime. Now, organised crime, it is exactly that. It's a billion, and again, in some aspects and some reports I read, it can be a trillion turnover business. Now, organised crime is insidious in nature. They have no interest about messaging. They have no interest, you know, for the greater good to put their message across. It's purely about making money. And again, having been in this career over 23 years, you know, I've saw the damage that organised crime can do to organisations, and also their methods and methodologies are no different to any business across the world. You know, these organised crimes would have KPIs, they would sack people, they would hire the best talent, and as they get more and more money, they recruit more and more people to do this work for them. So organised crime is very much like any other business. And in certain parts of the world, it's easier to attract people to this line of work because, you know, there may not be the job opportunities that they are in the UK or are in the US to do with cybersecurity. So again, you have a pool of resources that you can work for you for doing bad stuff in effect. Now, organised crime, everyone thinks they go after banks. You know, they go after banks, they're trying to transfer large amounts of money from bank A to bank B. Now, that clearly goes on, but there's other areas that they focus on, which is just as valuable. So I think individuals will probably be aware of ransomware, you know, which is the ability to encrypt the data and then blackmail people to pay them some money to get the data back. The big thing that we see is around venture capitalists and IP theft. And, you know, if you knew that a venture capitalist was going to give, I don't know, 300 million to a company in a Series A, that is very useful information to have. So again, going after VCs, going after individuals to get access to that information, right the way through to just after some spreadsheets or after some documentation that they can then sell to people's competitors. And again, it's a very lucrative industry to do that. So again, I don't want to dwell too much in it because that's an hour presentation in itself about threat actors, but it's really important that you guys just understand the difference between hacktivism, organised crime. The insider threat is exactly that. Again, I'm not going to go much into detail on that. You know, an insider threat is someone that works for the organisation that for a number of different reasons may find himself you know, leaving or maybe made redundant and potentially may get access to information they want to take with them or access to information that they want to sell. And then the final one is state-sponsored. Now, I don't think I'm going to give any secrets away. I did work for GCHQ at some point, but I think we all appreciate that governments hack each other. And if you want to read a book about that, I think Edward Snowden is a good place to start. We do a lot of work with the US because we have an office there, and one of an interesting kind of question over there was Edward Snowden, was he a traitor or was he a patriot? Did he portray his company secrets, or did he try and let the wider world know what was going on? Which again, state-sponsored is a different level of attack, and also method going in organisation. So at a very high level, just linking them back there, the 4 type of high-level threat actors, which hopefully then frames this conversation around the dark web. Now, Michael's clearly the expert on dark web and intelligence, so he's gonna dive into details. But in essence, really, the dark web is a place on. It's not even on the internet that you have to use certain browsers to do. Again, I feel I'm stealing your thunder here, Michael. So
it's okay.
Is it worth you stepping in here before?
I'm more than happy to. So thanks for that introduction on threat actors, Chris. I think that's really important for this presentation, because what we want to do here is we want to give you, firstly, a kind of a high-level introduction and a bit of an overview of what the dark web is. Secondly, kind of dispel any common myths, and give you a genuine and real insight into what the dark web is and how business can actually benefit from understanding what's involved and what's on there and what's happening on there. So to start with, I'll give you a real brief introduction on what the dark web is. I don't want to go into too much detail on the real technical aspect of it and all the classic things, if you have heard about the dark web, that a lot of people talk about. So I'll just kind of skim through this, give you a brief introduction. If you got any questions on this kind of thing, just ask them at the end in Q&A. So what is the dark web? The dark web is an area of the internet that's not indexed by popular search engines. So the one thing that I want to make very, very clear here is it's not part of your standard internet. Don't think of it as somewhere on Google that you can go to and then you're in the dark web. It's essentially a completely different type of internet. So it's not managed by the same kind of corporations and organizations. It's not managed by the same policing force, governments, policing forces and secret services or anything like that. They can't use the dark web in the same way that they can the surface web. So it's a lot harder to shut down sites and monitor and track people. Secondly, the dark web is not only Tor. If you have heard of the dark web before, the likelihood is you have heard of Tor, which is the browser that you would use to access the dark web. There are other instances of dark web, and that's why I really want to make it clear that it's a different type of internet. Tor is one version of the dark web. Another example I've got there is I2P. That's a different version of the dark web. They're completely separate things. And then ZeroNet as well is a different type of dark web, and I believe that's based on blockchain technology as well. Why does this matter as well? Why does the dark web matter? What's its kind of enticement for criminals? Fundamentally, it's the fact that it's anonymous. Technically, a lot of cyber professionals will say it's pseudo-anonymous, as you aren't 100% anonymous. But the vast likelihood that it's easy to track somebody to what you're doing is 99% near on impossible. So obviously for criminals and hacktivists and a lot of the, the kind of the guys that Chris spoke about at the start of this call, it's kind of a perfect place to communicate, share files, share ideas, discuss, and in a lot of cases laugh about some of their targets, which is something that is very common on the dark web. And hopefully I'm going to give you some more insight into what people do on it rather than just, selling drugs and guns and things like that. So moving on, I will give you a kind of an introduction onto what's the difference. I know I gave a kind of a high level one on the previous call, but previous slide, but hopefully this one will give you a little bit more information. And Chris, feel free to jump in anywhere. But I'll quickly jump through these. So surface web is what you'll normally find when you do your daily day stuff, Google, Yahoo, Gmail, anything you normally do and on your standard web browser. Deep web. This is a very common misconception. The deep web is not the dark web. The deep web is still connected to the same internet that most people use on a daily basis. It still uses the same kind of protocol, still uses the same kind of URLs. But what it normally contains is academic documents or university documents. One of the easiest ways to I always think about it is if you think of Google Docs and you think of when you start up a Google Docs or any other share platform kind of document, you have a very specific URL. That's on the deep web. It's not searchable. You can't search for that URL through Google. It's not going to get indexed or anything like that. It's on its own little kind of island in a sense. So that would be considered deep web. The dark web, and I really like this picture in particular because it's actually off the iceberg. I said if you've seen dark web presentations or you've discussed or talked about it before, you may have seen the iceberg image, which is the idea of the surface web is just the peak. I think there was a study done a couple of years ago that I think it was something like 99% of the internet is not indexed by Google. I think that number's massively reduced now. I think it's something like 86%. But yes, the dark web is completely off that iceberg. As I said on the previous slide, it's a completely different internet. It's a completely different protocol. It's a completely different part. It's not connected to our standard internet in any way, shape or form. I hope that's just provided some kind of high level context onto what it is. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on what happens in it. Chris, I don't know if you had anything to add to that slide at all.
I think you've cleared that. No, absolutely. Good stuff.
So what can you do on the dark web? And this is what I think is probably the most important thing, especially for business and cyber professionals and technological professionals as well, is what actually happens on there. What's done, what's discussed on there. So I think these three images are highlighted because I think it covers the vast majority of A, what cyber experts are into, and B, what I think is the most commonplace on the dark web. So the first one you can see in the top left is a cybersecurity forum or a hacking forum where people will go and discuss cybersecurity techniques, normally nefarious cybersecurity techniques, normally how do I hack somebody, or what's the best ransomware to use, or can you share with me some malware? That's the other thing that's shared obviously in there is malware. That's very commonplace. This site on the top left is a very free and open one. They don't really like paying for things on there. They seem to be a friendly community, which is quite strange, as you can imagine it. They very willingly share software. The top right, as you can probably imagine, is one of the sales sites that you find on the dark web. They are very commonplace. They do exist, and there are thousands of them. Chris, I'm sure you'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but it is literally the Amazon of the dark web. And there isn't just one. There is genuinely thousands of them all selling completely different things. Couple of rundown of some of the things that they sell on here just for further insight. As you can see there's fraud. This will normally be considered like tutorial documents, PDFs, books on how to commit certain types of fraud. People sell their skills and their techniques for a certain amount of Bitcoin. Drugs and chemicals, probably the most talked about and common place on the dark web is where people sell narcotics. It's a very easy way to sell things. And one of the most interesting ones I heard about was actually the Mexican cartel had moved to the dark web because they actually found it was a lot easier to distribute globally their supplies on the dark web than it ever was to do any of their previous trade routes, which I thought was pretty interesting. And as you can imagine, it probably is a lot easier. Guides and tutorials. This falls in the same category as the fraud. People are selling their guides and tutorial services, normally in PDF format or book format, for other people to use those skills. That could be a specific type of hack. That could be a scam. That could be fraud. That could be whatever. Counterfeit items, normally stolen money, faked money, from loads of currencies around the world. I've never bought any nor seen any, but I imagine that it's probably very good quality, to be honest, as it seems to be very commonplace. Digital products. This is normally cracked stuff. So normally when you find a cracked version of Photoshop or some kind of really expensive software, normally that's sold on here, normally with the kind of the cracking code with it. Jewels and gold. That's pretty much self-explanatory. I think most people have actually gone from robbing a jewelry store and selling it down the back alley somewhere to actually start robbing a jewelry store and then selling it somewhere on the dark web. Carded items. What I've found is that most of these are people that have bought very expensive items on stolen credit cards, and then to kind of disrupt the trace of that product, they sell it on the dark web and pass it through a bunch of hands to make sure that it doesn't get caught. Services. This is kind of like the rent-a-hacker idea and the fraud idea, the kind of the rent-a-fraudster, rent-a-scammer kind of thing. People will go on there, they'll sell their very specific services, and people will buy them. It's not always nefarious. Sometimes people are, selling their malware, their development skills, or I don't know, networking skills. Why you do it on the dark web, it's beyond me, but people do it. But the vast majority of it is pretty nefarious. Other listings, this is just anything that doesn't really fall into any category. Software and malware, people sell their software and malware, normally for a very cheap price, a scarily cheap price actually. And then security and hosting. This is normally bulletproof server hosting, which is the idea of essentially servers that the hoster of that will, they don't accept police requests. It's normally built into the side of a mountain or a nuclear bunker, which is real. It's worth a Google, by the way, server in nuclear bunker. And then the final image right at the bottom is which I personally think is the most interesting part of the dark web, and one of the threat actors that Chris mentioned earlier, which was hacktivists, which is the people that believe that all data and all information should be freely available to everybody. And this is a site that kind of correlates all that information. They try and make that information as public and as available to anybody, any kind of information that anybody could find remotely useful or remotely interesting, whether that's regarding powerful people, celebrities, politicians. They believe that all information should be free. An example that you can see here, I know this is Birmingham Tech Week, and I imagine a lot of you guys from the UK, as you can see here from Britain, you've actually got the Aaron Banks leak, which I believe either his text messages or his Facebook Messenger was leaked online. And the people that run this site genuinely believe that people have an insight and they need to know about this, as Aaron Banks is a high-profile figure. It's very commonplace on the dark web. You may have heard of some other sites that do this. For example, WikiLeaks. It's a very similar site to WikiLeaks, but they tend to not be as picky and choosy as WikiLeaks is. They just kind of show anything and everything that they think is necessary for the public to know. Chris, do you want to add anything to that slide at all?
Not this slide. I'll talk about the next slide. Before you go to the next slide, we have got a few questions, guys, and thanks very much. What we'll do is if you post your questions on the chat, then hopefully we're going to have 10 minutes left at the end and we can go through each of the questions. So just to put that out there to the audience as well. Michael, yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, let's talk about the commercialization of it.
Yeah, no problem. And I just wanted to add to that questions thing. There is there's a specific questions button that allows you to kind of put it into the Q&A section. It'd be great if you could put it in there. Just allows us to much easier to go through them all, but not a problem. I'm sure I'll go through the chat anyway. But yeah, next slide.
Cool. Shall I start, Michael?
Yeah, why don't you kick this one, Chris, and then I can follow on.
I think, yeah, no problem. I think the key thing here, and again, I'm on my organised crime theme, is that people look at the dark web and buying stuff as some kind of mysterious and hard place to get onto. It is very simple. Michael will go through each of the sales of what you can buy, but I think the biggest point that I find for some of our clients is that they're unaware that this, in essence, is capitalism personified. And what we mean by that is that, you know, these individuals that sell you drugs or that sell you accounts or sell you software, they want to make sure that your user experience is absolutely perfect, because the chances are that if you're buying off them and they can make that user experience perfect, that you'll come back and buy again. So these individuals would have feedback. So the way you think of eBay or Amazon for certain products is exactly the way it operates on the dark web. So, you know, if you've had some bad drugs, you can actually go back and complain. And in most cases, I should say, I'm told, you can get your money back. And not only that, they'll have your Bitcoins back, and they'll also have vouchers. So, you know, as Amazon Prime did their Amazon Prime Day, you'll have something similar operate on the dark web. Now, I mean, I'll talk about kind of my background again, kind of 20 years in cybersecurity, and something I've kind of been involved in is that any service that you can think of is probably on for sale on the dark web. And I know that's a big statement to say that, but I mean, anything that you can think of that you can make some monetary value off is probably there. Now, the obvious ones are drugs, guns, etc., videos, images, but it's pretty much anything you can think of. If they can make some monetary value, then they'll offer it as a service. And something that we've been involved in recently is the kind of rent-a-hacker, where we've seen a lot of individuals that, you know, may be going through some personal circumstances. They may be going through a divorce. They may be going through something that they may not like their company, that they want to get revenge. And they're looking at individuals to help them extract that revenge. And we've seen quite a bit of stuff in regards to the hackers going after organisations and even going after individuals. We were kind of made aware of a particular person who was going through a divorce, and a particular person on either side wanted to get some revenge and did some horrible stuff by placing images on the laptop, by extracting some Facebook information and putting it public, which had a massive impact into this individual's life. Now, that was clearly done by people giving access to certain skill types, and I think that's the key thing, that on the dark web, you know, if you want to do something that's particularly intelligent, but if you want to hire a service that you can't get anywhere else, you can get that on the dark web. And a bit like as business has gone global, so has the underworld. And, you know, Michael alluded to the cartel in Mexico. I mean, that's what's happening. If business is getting digitized, then that's exactly what's happening in the criminal world as well. And again, for even simple stuff like dealing with drugs, you know, gone are the days where you could go down your park. I still think you probably go down your park in certain areas to purchase narcotics of your persuasion. But ultimately now you were seeing people use logistics firms to deliver that drugs. And again, you can do that relatively easy. You can, you know, put that in a paper box with an Amazon smile on it, and then you can send that from London to Edinburgh. So again, there's lots that we can talk about there, but I think it's really important. The message I'm trying to get the audience to take away is that you should think of this as any other business. Just because it's selling bad services doesn't mean it doesn't operate like any commercial business on the market today. We're making sure it gets reviews, to make sure that it keeps its user experience fantastic, and to make sure that their end customers tell their friends, discounts, exactly what happens on the dark web, which I know sometimes surprise a lot of people. Michael, do you just want to take us through some of the other stuff as well?
Yeah, will do. I mean, this slide is what I would consider the more of the classical dark web things that you hear about through media and other public sources. We would be naive to not think this doesn't happen on the dark web, but I'm hoping this presentation is kind of elevating you beyond that just the dark web is guns and trucks. But as I say, we would be naive to think that this doesn't happen on the dark web. So to give you kind of just a quick run through of what each picture is showing you, in the top left, as you can see, that's Zoom, but 500,000 video conferencing accounts for sale on the dark web. This is essentially identifying that accounts get sold. Normally when a breach occurs, let's just take a breach that happened recently. So the EasyJet breach, for example, we are currently looking for that. And that's something that's kind of flying around the dark web, we believe. But what we believe currently that it's being passed around select individuals one by one, waiting for that big release onto a for sale site. So as I say, when breaches normally occur, information gets stolen, and they normally get passed around some pretty high bidders, normally the kind of the top of the food chain on the dark web. And then ultimately they get fed down then to the mass populace of the dark web, who will then go for sale on the dark web, and that information will get more and more saturated, and then the surface web individuals, cybersecurity professionals, will pick it up. This is why we believe that the dark web is really important, because normally it's that first stepping stone for when data breaches occur or new ransomware gets created or discussed or talked about. Second image is counterfeit money, as I mentioned earlier. This is very, very common on the dark web. It's very easy to distribute counterfeit money on the dark web. Normally you get pretty good profit off it. Whether the money works is, I don't know. But normally you're spending there, it looks like, so I can see the image there. Now I can't see exactly what the price is, but normally you'd pay something like, let's say £50 and you'd get £200 back in counterfeit money. In the bottom left, that's probably the most famous dark web site ever, Silk Road. It was the original kind of Amazon market. It was donned the Amazon of drugs and guns and things. It was created by a guy called Russ Ulbricht, and he believed in libertarian values. He wasn't a criminal. Well, that's what most people believe. I don't think he had a criminal intention. He genuinely believed that people should have access to these products because he believed it was their human right to have it. There's a fantastic book on it called American Kingpin, written by an author called Nick Bilton. Would 100% recommend that read. Really, really interesting. A bit of a backstory on Silk Road and Russ Ulbricht in particular. But Silk Road was the starting place, kind of really, for this marketplace economy on the dark web. It had a lot of unwritten rules in place, which have continued over to these modern for sale sites. They didn't really allow any extreme things. I don't want to discuss the elephant in the room, but I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. That wasn't allowed on the dark web, on the Silk Road site, sorry. And all drugs had to be clean. If they received a bad review that they weren't, they would be removed, etc., etc. It was all very human positive. It's obviously not human positive to sell drugs or whatever, but that's what he believed. He was a libertarian. The bottom middle image, obviously guns. You can buy guns on the dark web. It's pretty scary, to be honest, the amount that is sold and the price that they're sold at, because how easy it is to distribute this stuff. Bear in mind, in the UK, when you, I think you mentioned this earlier, Chris, when you ship something in the UK, it's not scanned. It's only when you ship stuff internationally that it gets scanned. So it's very easy to distribute these narcotics and drugs around the country. And then the final two images on the right are what Chris talked about earlier, which is the idea of a rent-a-hacker. You literally pay somebody X amount of Bitcoin and they will go and perform a very specific hacking or cybersecurity service for you. This could be phishing, this could be hacking. As you said, Chris, this could be a personal or a business thing. But these are classic cyber services. This is what the media likes to talk about. This is what everybody likes to talk about when it comes to the dark web. But what I'm hoping is, as I say, we know that this exists. We're not naive about this, but we don't feel for a lot of businesses that this is part of the rent-a-hacker stuff and obviously the for sale accounts. This isn't is especially reference to business. This is a lot more for police usage, but businesses need to be aware. And what I'm hoping that I'm trying to express in this presentation is businesses do appear on the dark web in terms of data leaks, discussions, threats, attacks, etc., which you'll normally find on, if we just jump back a slide here, on these kind of sites. Whereas these are normally the ones that the BBC will talk about when they pick up dark web stuff.
Yeah, and I was going to say just 2 points, Michael, just to pick up. I mean, the first one I think is really interesting. I think when you, and I wasn't aware of this actually, when you go from one country to another country, obviously most goods are scanned. I think it's 98 or 99%. But once it's in country, and you've got, the classic white van, who's going to do some logistics work for you, it's very unlikely that they get scanned. Sometimes they do, which I should put that out there, that absolutely, you know, depending on the logistic, the courier that you provide, they potentially may scan it, but it's very easy to hire certain couriers, should we say, that can deliver these goods for you, especially within country as well. Cool. So yeah, just wanted to add that point.
Yeah, no problem. Anything else? I know you said 2. I'm not sure.
No, I think that's it.
No,
that was
fantastic.
Thank you.
So this is one that I think I'm going to pass over to you, Chris, to initially talk about, but I'll just say some kind of a brief introduction to this. So this is what we found is probably the most modern form of communication on a dark web that we've seen, discussing COVID scams and how to utilize and exploit COVID-19 for their own criminal and kind of gain, to be honest. So there's a lot of things flying around on marketplaces, such as, you know, how to scam elderly people, how to scam for vaccines and things like that. People are buying these services. As we jump back a couple of slides just very quickly. So what you would find on these kind of guides and tutorials is you would find a guide and a tutorial for, so let's say, 1 Bitcoin of how to use COVID-19 to make money, kind of thing. And that will involve selling fake vaccines, selling fake treatment, etc., etc. And that's a very common thing that we found. So Chris, do you want to just talk very quickly about this, and then I'll go through the images?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going mute and I'll mute. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So yeah, no, absolutely. So again, just we have a security operations center, as we talked about, that monitors our client security. And part of what we're seeing, and again, we're going to make this UK focused, but actually it's the same in the US, and it's actually the same in the Philippines, is around using COVID-19. Obviously, you may have heard about COVID-19 over the last few months. And it's a good way to kind of scam people and also to get people's confidence. The one thing I want to bring up, and Michael will go screen by screen, because it's always good to do a bit of awareness to make people aware out there. But the track and trace tends to be quite a popular one at the moment. So you get a random phone call from an individual who's got a lovely accent, and then we'll say, you know, you've met someone with COVID-19 somewhere. And that's, you know, it's plausible. You could have gone to your local shop, you could have gone wherever, and you could meet someone. So straight away, they build that confidence with you. They then tell you that you've got to go for a test, and they say you have to go for a test now, and here's your local testing facility. So they do all, you know, if you say you're in Newcastle, they'll take you to the local Newcastle one. But then what they do is then, because they've already built that relationship and that leverage with you, they then say that you have to give credit card details. So they then try and extract information. Now, I think for certain cases that we saw, it's come from credit card details to just personal information about you, you know, your name, your address, your detail, date of birth, and they're saying that they need that for them to process your test. So just be aware of that, because we're seeing the success rate on that quite high, because it's absolutely plausible that someone could phone you from track and trace. Obviously, if you speak to the government, they'll never ask for, you know, information and blah blah blah. You know, that would compromise you. So again, if you've got your spider sense, as we would call it, you should be aware of that. But just be aware of the track and trace at the moment, and random phone calls saying that you've met someone who has been infected and they want some personal information off you. Just be mindful of that. So that's something that I just wanted to educate everyone here today. Michael, do you want to go through the other COVID scams?
Yes, will do. So again, this relates back to the dark web as well. What we found is that the majority of these did start on the dark web, and a lot of these scamming techniques started on the dark web, and discussions of this started very on and early throughout the year. Obviously, you can see here a lot of these are phishing emails and text messages and fake sites. I mean, the other work that I do at CyberQ Group is open source intelligence, which involves essentially collecting information online, public information. That could include a social media profile, that could include a blog. And just to give you an example of how easy it would actually be to kind of fool somebody, you know, if somebody's got a public Facebook profile and they recently logged in at a restaurant, an attacker who let's say this individual is very wealthy, and the attacker decided that he wanted to try and get some of this guy's money. He would potentially look at his public Facebook profile, identify the restaurant that he went to, and send a very, very on-beat kind of email or text message that essentially says, "Dear sir, you recently attended the restaurant that he attended to. You have now been in contact with somebody with COVID-19. We need to have a down payment, as you can see from this text message here, of £250 to confirm your test," or anything like that. And a lot of people who are scared, obviously, in the current year will believe that kind of thing. Then they'll pay that money. And over time, they do build up a lot of money. Yeah, so I'll just go through the images very quickly. As you can see here, it's kind of a standard phishing email. This one's actually from the World Health Organization. Again, pretty good target to kind of impersonate. Most people wouldn't, I guess, receive an email from the World Health Organization, but if they did, they'd probably think it's pretty serious. This one here looks like it's from the UK government as well. It looks pretty believable, especially as the thing is COVID-19. And it takes you to this fake site here, which is also very believable. I would always recommend people look at the URL. That's always a dead giveaway. This one here, again, looks like a standard kind of phishing thing, but actually this is a coronavirus cure review. So this is trying to get people's opinion on a fake cure, which is a very common problem that we found on the dark web, is people trying to identify vaccines and scams. And, even if you do get the product, you have absolutely no idea what's actually in these products. I mean, it could be anything, it could be rat poison. So, and people buy them because people are desperate. And it's sad. And this is why we do these kind of presentations and these kind of information, to try and educate people on what's actually happening and what really are the risks out there. As you can see from the bottom too as well, other standard kind of phishing emails. This one looks like it's originated somewhere from Russia, I'm assuming, and they're looking for a donation of Bitcoin. And on the left here, it's obviously the UK government, and this is actually a COVID-19 tax rebate. All very, very believable stuff, and I'm sure even myself, I'd probably have to take a double take on some of these emails. So yeah, I think what we're trying to express here is just be aware of these kind of things. They have originated from the dark web. There is criminal intention by it, and they are very clever and very intelligent at what they do. So just be aware of anything that you receive in relation to COVID-19, especially from the UK government or any other kind of world body to do with COVID-19.
And I just quickly update on that. I mean, there's lots of what was in on the dark web as well, and open source actually. It's not just so on the dark web. It's open source intelligence is around the fraud. So people sharing information, as Michael alluded to earlier, about how people share information. And also we think going forward, we think COVID-19 will be a source of quite a few scams. So in regards to the vaccine, when that comes out, I think there'll be definitely an uplift of people trying to get hold of that vaccine. And I think people will go to places that they wouldn't usually go to so they can get the vaccine. We think that's going to be a big seller when it comes out. And also I think COVID-19 is going to stay in people's minds definitely over the next 6 to 12 months, even when the vaccine's available. And again, Michael kind of picked up on it. Sometimes people are desperate. People do stupid things in desperate times. And, on the dark web, there is a place you can get some, vaccine, some drugs that make, that they say they cure cancer, etc., etc. And people will give that a shot. And again, as Michael said, at the end of the day, it's organised crime, as I alluded to earlier about the threat actors. It's all about the money. It's all about extracting money, and usually out of desperate people. But anyway, we've educated everyone enough, I think, about COVID-19. So you should all be, from a scams and an update perspective, be suitably protected against that, which is good. Cool.
Fantastic. Michael. So yeah, I'll just do a very quick technical insight. Again, if you guys have heard this kind of thing before, or if you've listened to a dark web presentation before, the likelihood is somebody's gone through this already. But what I want to provide you is a little bit of information, a little bit of history about the dark web, just to provide you with some further information here. So obviously this is the technical insight. I want to make it very clear that the dark web, and Tor in specifically, was not created for criminal intention. It was actually created by the US Navy and is now funded by a charity called the Tor Project. It is not inherently criminal. It was not created to be criminal. It's just a very good tool that criminals can use to exploit their criminal gains. So, technical insight. The way that dark web and Tor specifically works is it uses something called the Onion protocol to essentially mask your IP when you're connecting to one of the dark web sites. So what will happen, as you can see from this computer in the bottom left, is you will send a request to a website, where you will then bounce to one server, which looks like it's in somewhere in South America. It will then bounce to somewhere which is obviously in North America, and then over to Africa, and then it will go to that web server. It's essentially bouncing between 3, 4, 5 different, 5, 6, 7 different servers. So it's essentially continually bouncing and masking your IP. So it's very hard to trace you back to that original IP location. So, you send that request, you go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, get to the website, and the website will send that request back all the way through. It's very, very hard to track where that original IP has come from. The US government has taken one approach to try and counter this, which is to actually buy up some of these servers that are known as nodes, so they can try and intercept some of this traffic. So, for example, if they bought this node here, they would know exactly where the originating IP has come from. It's a very common tactic that NSA use, and I imagine GCHQ probably also use it as well. But there is so many nodes that get sprung up left, right, and center that it's very hard to buy them all. The amount of randomness that's involved as well, the likelihood that they're going to get a hit is very low. And obviously it's a charity as well, so people want to help out this charity, which I'll explain on the next slide, which hopefully will provide a little bit more context of why I'm being positive about it. People spring up servers at home, whether they're in their own country. A lot of them take place in Eastern Europe, which obviously have a lot lower kind of criminal prosecution for computer activities, especially in things like Russia, for example. But yeah, I don't really want to go into too much of the technical insight because I don't think it's the most interesting thing in the world, but I think it's important nonetheless. One more slide before I get into the positivity stuff. I promise. So this is one other approach that criminals take, which is to essentially share breaches. Probably one of the more common and more, I think one of the most important things for business and cyber and technological professionals at the moment is to identify where passwords and credentials have been breached online. As I mentioned earlier, they always start on the dark web. Well, 99% of the time they start on the dark web. And what attackers have recently started doing, especially with ransomware, is a pretty horrible approach to ransomware, which is the idea of essentially threatening companies that they've infected by breaching and leaking some of their files online, a small amount, to essentially show that they are game for this kind of thing. It's like, if you don't pay, we are going to share your files, and just to prove that, here's some of your files already. As you can see here, that here's some of the examples that people have been involved in this kind of thing. It's law enforcement as well. This is one of the biggest ones that we found. It's used by a ransomware called Doppelpaymer. I can't remember the criminal activist behind it. I remembered it the other day. I can't remember it now. It's a very big criminal organization that used Doppelpaymer. It's this type of ransomware. And these are all the sites and all the companies that they have essentially hacked. There's no kind of issue with showing this kind of thing because it is open information. It's public information. This is all present on the dark web. And these will have personal business files leaked, and they will be infected by ransomware. Chris, anything to add to that at all?
No, not at all, actually. I think you've covered that well.
Fantastic. So, positivity of the dark web. As I said, the dark web is not created for criminal intentions. It was created to allow people an anonymous way to share share secure files and share encrypted files. As I said earlier, it was created by the US Navy, so you can imagine they need to share a lot of encrypted files with each other across the globe. So it was a very good use case for it. They eventually kind of left it. And the Tor project picked it up for countries who did not have suitable access to the internet, such as China. And they created it and they funded it to allow people from China, North Korea, these kind of closed countries, to access Western sites that could provide them with more knowledge on their own country. As you can imagine, North Korea, a lot of it is propaganda and kind of cult of personality stuff. So having access to, for example, the BBC, which do have a dark website, they can gain a lot more insight into actually real world news. Facebook as well, they also have a dark website because they believe that it's important for people to be able to connect to these people around the world who necessarily can't connect to the standard version of Facebook. So what I'm trying to say is the dark web isn't inherently criminal. It's just a great tool that criminals can use due to the anonymity behind it. The dark web does have some very good use cases. So a lot, the solution of essentially just shutting it down and just killing it isn't always the best thing, because oftentimes it's a lifesaver for some people. Oftentimes for the journalism that's able to come out of it and the communications and the interviews and stuff that's able to come out of it is life-changing for a lot of people, and gives the rest of the world a lot more insight into some of these closed countries. Obviously, as I said earlier, it would be naive to think that there isn't criminal activity on it. And we believe that as cyber professionals, we need to do more. And also we believe that the police and obviously criminal prosecution need to do more. But it is a tough process. The technology behind it is very advanced. It's very clever. So it is hard to kind of shut this kind of thing down. But what I'm hoping you take away from this is to think of the dark web as more of a holistic approach rather than just evil, evil, evil. Think of it more behind the technology that allows evil to occur, but it also allows good to occur.
Agreed. I think that's that's a really, really good point. We can't emphasize that enough. We've walked you through the threat actors, we've walked you through around the dark web, but I mean, ultimately, there's certain countries where the dark web is absolutely pivotal to individuals, to get some messages out, to talk about free speech. And the dark web gives a platform, the Tor network gives a platform for people to do that. And it's all good saying that the dark web's a bad place, and I suppose it's got an unfortunate name, really, hasn't it, Michael? The dark web.
It does, yeah.
And manifests itself as evil people doing evil things, but in essence, it can be used around privacy to discuss certain subjects that your country or that's that you don't want to feel comfortable about the open source. So again, that's a really important message to leave the audience with, that the dark web isn't just used for bad stuff and they shut it down. There's a lot of good stuff that happens on there. There's a lot of people talking about free speech, talking about governments and trying to do change on there as well. Cool. Michael, do you want to add anything more onto that?
No, I think that's fantastic. I think that's good to go.
Yeah, that's good. I'm mindful of the time. Oh,
yeah,
right on time actually. So it's 7 minutes past 11. So I think we've got 8 minutes. We've got a few Q&As. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to do the Q&As now. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to answer that. We've got a few. So we've got a question from Amit. If someone would like to pursue their career in cybersecurity, would you advise doing any formal courses or learn techniques and tools directly and start with a project? Michael, I'm going to give that to you.
It really depends on kind of the career path you want to pursue. Attending, going for job interviews and putting on your CV to have a kind of formal qualification is always great. Technical expertise is also great, so I'd probably recommend both, to be honest.
Cool. That's good. And I mean, hopefully he's put another question with regards to the dark web. Since there's lots of illegal businesses that happen, do you think the governments and major countries will shut that down? I mean, I think we've answered that question with that there's good stuff. It's not. I think when you think of the dark web or you think of a place, it's not necessarily think that there's bad things that operate there. There obviously is. There's also good stuff as well. So it's not a case of just shutting it down just because there's some bad stuff, so to speak, going on.
But I just wanted to add there, international police do have a conscious effort to shut down a lot of the more nefarious and more prominent dark websites. Obviously, some of the elephants in the room, again, I'm not going to mention it, but I imagine you know what I'm talking about. A lot of those sites have been shut down, and they have been the priority for a lot of the police, and a lot of the weapons distribution sites have also been a priority for the police. And it is an international effort. There are a lot of sites out there. I wish I had a screenshot to show you that essentially give you a banner that shows this site has been shut down by all of these countries. And it's like the Dutch police, the Dutch cybercrime unit, the UK cybercrime unit, the French cybercrime unit, etc., etc. A lot of the European countries work together, and obviously America is involved as well, as Tor is kind of their problem, I guess. But obviously it's a global phenomenon.
Agreed. No, thank you for that, Michael. Question from Ahmed. Hi, I assume that the browser communicated to end-to-end encryption. How is the owner of the server? How the owner of the server can monitor the communication?
They can't. So it is encrypted, heavily encrypted at each request. Even if you own one of the nodes, you can't intercept that. That's kind of one of the policies of having one of these nodes. You install the Tor project software, and that runs in the background. You have no insight into that as a node operator or anything like that. And in terms of police trying to monitor something like that, as I said earlier, it's the idea of they can't really, because it's just a random IP sending a bunch of garbage to another IP that they don't know where. They don't even know what the server is. They don't know where the host computer is. Their only kind of counter to that is to buy up one of the nodes and hopefully intercept it at its first bounce.
Agreed. Okay, cool. We have a question from Charlie. I'm currently doing a Bachelor's of Science in Cybersecurity. What is the best way to get into the industry after university?
Work experience. Start with work experience and work your way up.
Agreed. And there is another question. Well, there's quite a few questions actually, guys. So I am going to try and go as quick as I can. I think from Colin, can all ISPs be made to declare the IP code for all web users so that the police authorities can track and trace these dark web users? I can't believe all governments allow the Chrome to continue freely. I think.
Yes, so the idea of an ISP essentially tracking people's IPs and things like that, that you enter the privacy concern there is not everybody's a criminal, so why should everybody have to essentially face the consequences for their being criminals? It would be very difficult for the ISPs to essentially manage that, and they don't really want to be honest, because it's not their problem. They'd have to spend a lot of resources and a lot of money to do that. It's not a case that people allow it to happen. It's a case of they can't really stop it. It's a slow, gradual process, and this is why we do these kind of presentations. This is why we kind of implore the technological community and the cybersecurity community to actually get involved in the dark web too, so we have a better understanding. It's kind of our responsibility to have a better understanding of the dark web, and then informing the rest of the world who don't have as much technological information. I mean, we expect the police to kind of shut down the dark web, but in most cases, I mean, for example, in the UK, I know that our cybercrime team isn't actually that big. And we can't really expect them all to be cyber experts and dark web experts. That's what we're for. So we need to get more involved in it, and we need to understand it more, and we need to create more technology to allow that process to be easier fundamentally.
Agreed. Thank you for that. And then why wouldn't you use the dark web for all internet activity rather than normal internet? Now, I suppose the encryption, well, yeah, Michael, I'll pass over to you.
I would. I think that Tor is a good browser to use if you are conscious about your security. You know, Tor is not a browser that immediately just transports you to the dark web and leaves you there. If you want to go to the dark web, you have to type in very specific URLs. Tor as a browser still allows you access to classic sites, but it still runs through that onion protocol. So you will still bounce through hundreds of different nodes when you're trying to approach to get to Google or anything like that, or DuckDuckGo, which is a far superior search engine, in my opinion.
I agree with that, actually. Do you want to quickly update the panel about DuckDuckGo, just quickly, because I think that's a good...
So DuckDuckGo is a search engine that does not track you. So when you make a search, there's no kind of advertiser or anything behind that. It will allow you to essentially search freely with no tracking in place. It also actively blocks trackers on their search engine site. It uses Google to scrape, so it essentially uses Google search results, but just doesn't have the tracking that Google's involved in. So if you do want to improve your privacy, DuckDuckGo is a fantastic thing to add to your bookmark list and try and replace Google with. I think that's near on impossible, but if you can try and use it as much as possible, that would be very, very good.
Absolutely. I concur with that as well. I like DuckDuckGo as well. It's a great search engine. So again, check it out. David Wilkinson asked, what should we do as individuals to protect ourselves from hackers? Now, just a bit of situation awareness, David. So we operate a security operations center for some of our customers, which is 24/7 monitoring, as well as some other services that we do, the digital human reconnaissance. But what we're seeing is an increase in attacks. So we're not seeing a decrease, and we're seeing that, but just quickly as situation awareness. The reason the game's changed with COVID-19, and what I mean by that is the threat landscape used to be, 15,000 people in an office, that were behind a firewall or behind some protection. That 15,000 people there in an office, they're now all at home in 15,000 homes. And the problem you have with homes is a few things. One, if you've got a work laptop, if they're anything like my daughters, they probably want to install some games on there, or they want to play with their laptops. On top of that, behind your home router, you may have other devices that aren't secure. So you may have a CCTV, you may have some IoT devices, which again, could allow access into your home network, which then again could allow access into your laptop. So again, I'm coming back to answering your question directly, but that's what we're seeing in our security operations center, just the increase, the amount of attacks, especially if COVID-19 happened. I mean, protect yourself as an individual. Hackers, I can't stress two-factor authentication, David. So if you have an email address, definitely use two-factor authentication. Something you have, something you know. Good security awareness. Don't click on links. Don't download files from places you don't trust. Make sure you have the latest patches. Make sure you have the latest AV. I suppose, David, you could spend another hour on that presentation, but hopefully that gives you some...
Well, I was just going to say very quickly, Chris,
yeah.
I know you've mentioned some very specific techniques to use there, but I think to everybody on the call, that the general technique to ensuring that you're safe from hackers is just improving your overall cyber maturity. The analogy that I make is most people inherently know to not walk down a dark alley at nighttime. People don't know where and what not to do on the dark web. It's not instilled in them as much as it is in daily life. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to improve people's education in cybersecurity. We don't want this masquerade anymore. We need people to understand what cybersecurity really is and what the risks are. We don't think that just cyber experts need to know this. As I say, people know to not walk down a dark alley. People need to know to not click that link and to know what a dodgy email looks like. People need to understand this, and people need that education. So what I couldn't recommend wholeheartedly enough is not only some of the techniques and tools that Chris mentioned, but just in general, knowing what your digital footprint looks like, knowing if you've been compromised, just improving your overall cyber awareness is probably the most critical thing you need to do.
Great, no, thank you for that, Michael. We've had lots of questions, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm going to have to disappoint some of you, but we're going to, the lucky individual, the last questions that we're going to have, is going to be from Ahmed. What I would say before I read this question out, Michael, if you have any further questions or you'd like the slide deck which was mentioned, we're gonna put it to the Birmingham Tech Week to do that. If you have any further questions, you can contact us on the team. I'll put the email address on the chat, just because I'm mindful that we haven't answered all the questions. And while I'm typing the email out, I'm going to give this to you, Michael. As a security expert, what source of info can be extracted from any server node if you own the server? This is from our penetration tester team, really, isn't it?
Yeah, this isn't something I've had any experience with. I don't own any of the server nodes or anything like that. I've liked to have a look at some of them before, but what I can tell you and what I assume is it's probably very, very heavily encrypted, so you could probably gather very little from it. You know, the integrity of the Tor project would be to ensure that all people are anonymized, and if you've got one weak link there, you've obviously got a big problem. So I would probably say that each probably server node is A, monitored by the Tor project, and B, heavily encrypted and heavily secured. So when you buy that server, you're essentially just sacrificing money for a charity. You're essentially giving a donation. You're not actively hosting that server. You're not running that server. You're essentially just giving a donation to get given a box that you plug in and do nothing with.
Cool. So thank you very much for that. And again, I do apologise to everyone else who we didn't have answers to their questions. I just want to respect everyone's time. I do apologise. We're kind of 2 minutes over. Just to kind of end this, again, I've put the email address, the team at cyberqgroup.com. We're also going to be sending this recording to Birmingham Tech. So any further questions, please reach out there. The website is full of useful information. So we do blogs there about threat intelligence, also what we're seeing in the security world. So feel free to go to cyberqgroup.com. We also are on LinkedIn as well, where we have individuals that do blogs. Again, that updates you what's happening in the cybersecurity world. I think all I would say, I'd just like to thank you all for attending. It's been a very, very good session, lots and lots of questions. And again, all have a great day and speak to you all soon. Take care.
Fantastic. Much appreciate for the attendance, guys. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye-bye.